I've often found myself on the edges, or perhaps more accurately, in a gap, sometimes not belonging to any group, sometimes belonging to multiple groups. I was born in 1979. That means I'm on the edge. I'm in between Gen X and the millennials. In my church, as I was growing up, there were two distinct groups, one made up of Gen X, the other made up of millennials. I was in the middle. When it comes to church, I grew up in a conservative Baptist church, did my gap year with a charismatic mission agency, and studied theology at a relatively liberal college. I found myself identifying with multiple groups. For almost 3 decades, my ministry roles have been about supporting churches to work better together. You may have noticed that churches find a lot of things to disagree about. But I found quite quickly I could easily get along with and understand people who had vastly different views on many different topics. I actually became a bit worried that this may not be a good thing. In the UK, we have an expression, sitting on the fence. It means that you haven't made your mind up about, or you're divided on an issue. When you say that someone is sitting on the fence, it often has a negative association. It's about being divided or indecisive. And although there are a whole range of issues where I don't hold strong opinions, I'm also, on many issues, a decisive person with pretty strong convictions. It wasn't so much that I was sitting on a fence, it was more that I was able to bridge the gap between people who held very opposing beliefs and opinions. I came to realize that this isn't a problem or a weakness, it's an asset and a strength. It was God using my past experiences for his current purposes. Jesus was criticized by the religious elite for hanging around with sinners, but he still got invited into their homes to have dinner with them. He was able to connect comfortably with different groups of people, many of which he disagreed with. And then you look at his 12 disciples. There was Matthew, a tax collector working for the Romans, and Simon the Zealot, who was part of a terrorist group seeking to get rid of the Romans. We know that we can achieve more by working together. That's the Viva story that so many of you are a part of. Working together, we can make a bigger, better, longer lasting impact in the lives of children. And we know that children around the world are facing big intersecting problems, and this will require big intersecting solutions. Increasingly, the response is not only going to require like-minded people and organizations and groups working together, it will require working across different sectors with people very different from us. As someone who often finds themselves in bridging gaps, I connect in the NGO space, the church space, the government space, the academic space, the business space. They often each have their own approach in how the needs of children should be met, and often have little understanding of what each other are doing. But when we do work together across these different sectors, so much can be achieved. Why don't you put some of your own examples in the chat? When I was in Guatemala last year, I loved hearing about Red Viva's Guatemala's I Exist campaign, which is about encouraging people to register their children so they exist in the eyes of the government and therefore can access services such as education and health. The government were the ones that could register children, but for many reasons, people were not doing so. On the other hand, churches and other community groups were trusted, so could encourage people to register their children, but couldn't actually do the registration. It required an intersection. And by working together, thousands of unregistered children are now registered, so now exist. I love Formula One motor racing. It's known for developing high-tech equipment and its precision and rapid response under pressure. That's why the healthcare sector often teams up with companies involved in Formula One to develop cutting-edge, life-saving equipment and improve surgical procedures. It turns out there's a lot more similarities between a pit stop and an operating table than you might think. The complexity and potential of technology that now exists is phenomenal, but not many NGOs will be able to maximize its usefulness. not without intersecting with businesses and governments. We need to be working at the intersections of sectors. But you already know that, don't you? And you already know how hard it is. Working with churches that you disagree with on some theological issues is one thing. But what about working with other faiths? What about working with governments when you disagree? Or working with businesses that you worry might have an alternative agenda? It's not easy. So let me share 3 things I've learned along the way that will help us see more clearly. There's a risk that when things intersect, they blur, yet blurredness won't help anyone. We need clarity. Firstly, when you're working with other sectors, these sectors are made up of people, humans, people that probably are a lot more like you than you may think. First, we must begin by seeing the best in the other person, in the other people. We must remember that most people, for most of the time, have good intentions. We must see the best in them. And if you're struggling to do that, just remember how similar you are to them. Did you know that as humans, in terms of DNA, we are 65% identical to chickens, 82% identical to dogs, 98% identical to pigs, and 99% identical to every other human? We are more similar to the person we disagree with than we might think. As you're seeking to see the best in others and see them clearly, it does not mean you should ignore motives that might be misplaced or even corrupt. But remember, we must look in a mirror at our own motives. And my principle when it comes to working with others is remember, on most issues that we disagree about, they might be right and I might be wrong. So, secondly, as well as seeing others clearly and seeing their best, you need to see yourself clearly so that you can bring your best. We need humility. We must recognize we need others, that they might have better ideas and resources than us. But for many of us, when it comes to cross-sector collaboration, we don't need to be more humble. We actually need to be more confident. We often feel small and wonder what we have to offer to big NGOs or governments or academics. But we have so much. We have experience, we have understanding, we have connections, we have access, we have the trust within the communities that we serve. We have the things that they don't have, and it's often what they need. I often find myself at tables where I don't think I belong. A decade ago, I had recently begun leading Home for Good, an organisation in the UK that was encouraging Christians to foster or adopt children and equipping churches to better support them. I one day found myself at a table with CEOs of fostering agencies and leaders of government-run adoption departments and highly experienced social workers. I felt intimidated and surprised that they were eager to hear what I had to say. What was happening? Firstly, they all had a specific focus, either adoption or fostering. They worked in a specific region, and they were either in government or NGO-run services. Whereas we worked in both fostering and adoption. We worked all over the country and worked with government and NGO-run services. We could provide a perspective that none of them had. And secondly, they were all beginning to see the potential of the church as a source of new foster carers and adoptive families. It turns out that they were trying to impress me. So when you're working with other sectors, bring your best. When you're in a room of academics and business people, don't try and bring academic or business thinking. That's what they can bring. You bring the best church thinking or NGO thinking or community group thinking that you can bring. You bring a different perspective. Without that perspective, the picture will be incomplete and the solution will be less if you bring what you can bring. And finally, as the circles overlap, we need to see clearly, ensuring that things remain in focus and do not get blurry. We should not dilute who we are. In most of my meetings with academics and policymakers, I don't have to play down my faith because I'm there because of my faith, because they realize how important it is to engage with faith communities. Working together is about circles overlapping, not being consumed by one another. It works best when there is a clearly defined area of overlap. It's in this area where there's focus, where our agendas intersect, where we can all bring our best, and that where we can achieve great things together. It's also okay that there are areas where you're not overlapping, where you're working on different agendas, where there might be conflicting motivations and significant areas of disagreement. Be honest about this and do not pretend to agree on everything. This cutting edge conference has had a dual theme. It's been about understanding the challenges and opportunities at the cutting edge of working together for and with children at risk. And it's about recognizing that it's at the edges where things intersect. As complex problems intersect to make life harder for children, we must also intersect, not just with people who think like us, but with those who don't. It's in these overlaps, the edges, where I believe we'll find new energy, new ideas, and the greatest potential for impact. If we can come together, seeing the best in others, bringing the best of ourselves, and working with clarity, then real change is possible, and children will be the ones who benefit.